Are you an aspiring leader who knows you have more to offer but you can't seem to get ahead? Do you frequently feel overwhelmed and under-supported? Listen to the Overcome to Become podcast as we talk about actionable tasks and mindsets that you can apply to begin leading yourself. Hi, I'm Dr. Angela Buckley, your host and author of the Strength in Nature Leadership Series and Likeable Leadership Reflection Journals. I'm a mother, consultant, triathlete, and coach. In Overcome to Become, I share with you the science-backed and experience-proven lessons I've learned in my own leadership journey to beat burnout. Hey everyone, welcome back to Season 3, Episode 10, and today I have with me Maria Daniels. She is a dynamic serial entrepreneur with a knack for making life easier for busy business owners. She's the brains behind Reset Business Consulting, where she and her team take the stress out of new projects and bring a touch of fun to the process. Maria is also a holistic nutritionist and restorative fitness coach at Natural Approach Health and Fitness, guiding individuals toward healthier lives through balanced nutrition and restorative fitness. Maria's expertise and enthusiasm shine through on her numerous podcasts, including Successfully Chaotic. Her shows are packed with insights on entrepreneurship, wellness, and living a balanced life, inspiring listeners to pursue their passions and conquer challenges with confidence. On the home front, Maria is a devoted wife and mother of 7, living on a charming microfarm. Maria Daniels is a true inspiration, showing that passion, dedication, and a holistic approach can bring profits and a happy life. Hello, Maria. Thank you for joining us. We are in Season 3 of the Overcome to Become podcast, and this season we're focusing on sleep. And with all of your crazy, busy, chaotic, right? Successfully chaotic businesses that you run, I also know that you have a huge focus on holistic health. And so I would love to hear you talk about your experiences and also your coaching support with people getting enough sleep in order to keep up with their very busy lives.
Absolutely. Well, I know, first of all, this is one thing I tell any of my clients, and it doesn't matter if it's on the business world, they come to me, with an issue, or on the wellness side, they come to me with an issue. Sleep is the foundation to everything that we do. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what your profession is, what your hobbies are, what your day-to-day life looks like. The foundation of every single thing that you do is sleep. And I used to wear my own sleepless nights like a badge of honor, thinking that I was getting ahead, right? I would stay up all night, getting all these things done. So I thought, but the truth was I was sabotaging myself, because sleep, we think about it like resting, and it is rest, but it's not just about resting. It's about resetting. When we sleep, our brains process a lot of information. Our body repairs cells. We consolidate memories during sleep. Our body detoxes during sleep. There's so many things that go on that we're not even thinking about. And so when we sleep and, our body's doing all these things, it actually is like a tune-up for our body and our mind. And so for busy entrepreneurs or busy professionals, parents, just people, right? This means that if we're getting enough sleep, we are thinking more clearly, we are making better decisions, we are more creative. So if we are prioritizing our sleep, then our productivity is going to go way, way up. So as much as you think, well, I'm going to stay up extra late tonight, quote unquote, catching up, you're typically going backwards.
I'm an early morning person, so I'm not very good at the catch up at night. I often am willing to throw in the towel pretty early and try to get up early and cram it all in before 10 a.m.
Yeah, so, well, and that's the better way to do it, obviously. And it's funny. I don't even know how it happened. Like looking back, how I ended up doing the late nights for a while. There's multiple things, right? And always multiple things. But I in high school even I worked a third shift job in high school. It was in Tennessee. Laws were different, and I worked a third shift job. So I would start my third shift job at 11 p.m. and I got off 6 a.m. And so that started all that. But I, went to school, I played sports, and I needed to make money. And so to be able to do that, I squeezed it in. So I started those bad habits early on. And so going into having children and all of that, that just like furthered my issue. You
Right.
know, having kids, obviously when you have kids, you're especially when they're very young, you're, get lots of sleepless nights, you're up and down. And so that just kind of furthered that problem. And so it took a while until I figured out that that was what was causing a lot of my issues, right? And it took me way too long to actually figure that out, and it's I always jokingly say that a lot of times, even if you know these things, we're not really good at putting up that mirror
Right.
looking at ourselves because, we'll always like quote unquote catch up later, figure it out later, take care of ourselves later. And I have 7 children, one of those being on the spectrum. And so with that, there was a lot of things coming before my own personal needs. And I know before we went on the recording, we were even talking about boundaries. And that was one of the things that I had to do, right? My boundaries that I had to start setting wasn't only just with like the outside world, outside of my family. It also started with just me realizing within myself that I needed to kind of focus on my own health, that I wasn't doing anybody any favors by being like the martyr of the family and never sleeping and never taking care of myself. And, I tried to eat healthy, and I exercise. Those were things that I was decent at, but I still didn't like eat enough because I'd forget to
Right.
eat. I wasn't drinking enough water because I would forget to drink. I wasn't sleeping enough because I always had things I was behind on. And so those things, that nurturing, allowing my body to replenish and reset and all those things, I was terrible at it because I was too busy right now, right? It's always right now. But later we won't be. Well, the right now went for years.
Yep.
And so I had to start setting those boundaries to say, nope, I'm going to start prioritizing my sleep, which that's hard. You're very type A like I am. And so I have so many things that I'm doing at all times. And then there's other things that's waiting for me to have time to do, right? I have this like ongoing to-do list. And I actually love that about, myself. But the reality of it is also is that I have to make sure and keep myself accountable to, nope, I go to bed at a specific time. And I'm typically in bed by 9 p.m. If
Good
I'm
for you.
not, if it doesn't happen that night, there's a fluke, you know what I mean? There was a day last week that it just so happened. There's a lot of things going on the day. I didn't get in bed until 11, but I purposely, like knew that that was going to be happening. And I actually made sure that I rested that next day as much as I could. Those things are going to happen, but it
Mhm.
shouldn't be the norm, right? It shouldn't be the norm that you're staying up later than normal. I try to make sure that I make that a priority, but it wasn't, an easy thing. It took a little bit of time.
So you said that you have 7 children. How do
Yeah.
you get them in bed so that you get to bed at 9? I am struggling with that. I'll be honest. I have a teenager who decided that ADHD means he's allowed to stay up late. And
Yeah.
so I often have to like basically wake up to tell him to go back to sleep, to go to sleep even. So like I will get into bed. I can work out all my whole day and get myself to bed at the hour that I want, but then I have him, right? And if I don't, I'll wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and he'll still be doing whatever. Or sometimes I'll go to sleep thinking he's asleep and he gets up.
Yeah.
So I struggle with figuring out how to get the rest of the household asleep as well.
So, I mean, there's obviously a lot that we can unpack with that, but right now at this point in time in my journey, I have 4 older kids that are quote unquote adults, young adults, right? Out of those, the 25-year-old, she lives in Virginia. She's married. She actually has 2 little girls. And then I have 24-year-old, a 22-year-old, and a 19-year-old. They're self-sufficient at this point. 3 of them are moved out. One of them is still at home-ish, but she works a lot and, goes to school and rarely comes home. But the 3 that are still at home are 15, 11, and 7.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with them, it's funny because I'm a different parent than I was with my older kids too. you know, when you're doing this, so I've been a mom for over 25 years at this point. So
Right.
like a quarter of a century. Trust me, I did the math and I was like, wow, okay. So at this point, I know parenting. And what I figured out about parenting is that you're never actually going to figure it out. Like you're never going to figure it
Yep.
out, right?
Yes.
So you have different kids, different personalities, different times going on just in the world itself. Like everything just changes so rapidly. You're never going to quite figure it out. So with my older kids, I tried what you said, like just tried to make sure that I was getting them all in bed and whatever. And when they're little, it's a different story, right? You can't leave
Right.
little kids
Right.
up. But when they were older, I even would try to do the same thing. But I figured out with my younger kids, I do it completely different. It is very much a here's what you're supposed to do. I lay it out what they're supposed to do. You're still going to get up on it. We still have stuff we have to do tomorrow.
Yep.
I let them feel that.
Yep.
And the reason that I do that is I figured that out over the course of just parenting, that I wasn't doing myself definitely not any favor. And I really wasn't doing them any favor either by not letting them feel the fact that when we stay up really late and have to do something early in the morning, it freaking sucks. We hate
Yep.
ourselves all day long. So I let them figure that out.
Yep.
And, sometimes you mentioned ADHD and all that. Sometimes the way that, people's brains are, it changes our sleep patterns. My 15-year-old is on the spectrum. And so when he was little, he would only needed about an hour of sleep a night. And, me and my husband would have to tag team because at that time, he was very delayed on a lot of things and could not be left alone at all, like at all.
Right.
So, we had to kind of like accommodate, his natural sleep patterns that he had. Now we worked a lot with him over the years with different things and he does a little bit better now. But at 15, he still goes through these patterns. And it's really funny that during full moon, like a couple days before the full moon, during the full moon, and a few days after the full moon, he can't sleep at night. It wires him, which if you start looking into, there actually is some science behind that. Like during the full moon, your brain produces more norepinephrine, which just like increases that like awakeness and, it's basically, adrenaline. And so his already differently wired brain just comes alive. And so I have figured out that that's just his normal patterns. And we allow for that, which we can do that because he's homeschooled. He goes to an online STEM-based academy that we can kind of cater to what he needs. And so that works for our family. It doesn't work for every family. Like I work for myself, but I think the point I want everybody to kind of take from this is I don't think there's any hard written rules on these things. You need to look at your family dynamic, like what you need to be able to do just to basically get through life, right? And then break that down to what each person definitely needs to be able to kind of be the best version of themselves, including what we're talking about today, getting good quality sleep. And so whatever that process looks like for you and your family, that's the best way to do it. I don't think there's like one, thing that you can do that's going to just like fit in every single family. And most of the time what happens is you see these things and you try to like fit it into your family. Like, well, that doesn't work for me. And then you just give up on the whole thing altogether instead of modifying it to work for your family. And, so, I mean, for you, it kind of depends. I mean, like for me at your son's age, I would be like, well, here's what you need to do. You should get in bed. If you don't, oh, well, we're still getting up in the morning. But I'm very much that mom, like, do it again. Do it anyway.
Oh yeah.
I
We regularly do have those conversations, but it would be nice to have fewer conflicts from time to time, right? But it's the teenage growth and we'll be good for a while. And then, it kind of like unravels and we have to reestablish consequences and boundaries do change. Like the teenage brain is changing and the summer is different than the school year. And there are different things, right? So, so I think flexibility, to your point, is really important. And I also agree with you, like letting them feel the consequences. I think we had an exchange student here, and I think there were one or two mornings where I think I may have surprised her because I did not let him lollygag, right? Like we had places to go and we had places to be, and he wasn't making alert decisions. Like honestly, in general, he makes decent decisions, but he wasn't awake, and I was not having any of it because it was dragging everybody else down. So but consequences are real.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think again with parenting, it is very much that balance of figuring out like, okay, well, why do you want to stay up? Because sometimes, I mean, there's things that we want to do that we want to prioritize at least for that night, because like I just mentioned, I love my sleep. I want to go to bed at 9 p.m., but I was willing to stay up until 11 the other night because at that moment for that day, that was a different priority. And I think those things are okay sometimes. And it's
Right.
okay even
Right.
to work with our kids to realize that like sometimes it's okay, right? When there's something special going on that you're willing to stay up for, to be able to know that you're going to be a little bit more tired the next day. That's okay. As adults, we make those decisions, right? So
Yes.
it's just encouraging the fact that it's okay. Well, let's have this discussion. I think, that's how I parent differently at this point than I did with my older kids. With my older kids, I was very much, just that helicoptery mom that's trying to like, I was helping, quote unquote, but in the reality, I wasn't really preparing them as much as I could have on those things. I did some things, like I did, I was able to prepare them for some things, but that was one that I had to kind of learn later.
Yeah.
But with sleep itself, though, just kind of circling back to sleep, though, you know, it it's not just like a personal matter. It actually affects everything around us. Cause you mentioned whenever, he was real tired, he was kind of dragging everybody down. And so, that's one thing, even kind of looking back on my own journey when I was not sleeping as much, like I definitely wasn't showing up as my best version of myself on anything, right? I was cranky. I was more short tempered. I wasn't as patient as I could have been. I definitely wasn't as productive as I could have been. Right. So, when I started prioritizing my own sleep, I was able to be a little more patient with my kids. I was more present in meetings. I was more enthusiastic with projects that I did because I had that energy.
I think that's really what, when I'm talking about leadership and I'm talking about learning how parenting and running a household are also the skills that translate into running a team. Like, yeah, some of these conversations that we're having about getting kids in bed or feeling consequences, they're a little bit different, right? The mechanisms are different, but fundamentally, the concepts are the same when it comes to leading a team. And then understanding when we talk about circle of influence, right? Like I can control myself, I can influence those around me, and I have no influence about on the greater world. Understanding how your sleep decisions impact yourself versus how they influence the others that are around you, I think it's really important from the conversation of both leadership and parenting.
Absolutely. Well, and I mentioned earlier in the conversation that even if people come to me on a business side, we end up talking about sleep. Somebody can come to me for marketing, for social media, for website development, and somehow we end up talking about sleep. And the same thing, like in the wellness world, like obviously
Yep.
people are coming to me with like, like nutrition needs or hormonal health needs or autoimmune needs. We always end up talking about sleep. And it's because, like you just said, it is part of such a big, it's a part of our life, right? We're all humans. We all need good
Yes.
quality sleep. And so you need to, if you're listening right now and maybe you work at a company or you're an admin or you own your own business, it's important that you start to implement these things in because, my marketing consulting company, Reset Business Consulting, we always encourage a culture of wellness, even though that's not a wellness company, right? But
Right.
we encourage a culture of wellness because we have seen how a well-rested team on how, a team that really focuses on things like sleep and eating healthy food, how that transforms a business. And so that's the reason that ends up being something that we discuss even with our clients. Do all of them want to listen? Probably not, but it ends up being
No.
something that is brought up, right? Because it's never just one thing. If somebody's having an issue with their business, it's never just one thing.
Right.
And those all trickle down to, well, how is your team feeling? Like, how is we even hear about company culture, right? Which is so, so, so important, but it goes deeper than that. Well, Randy that's sitting at his desk all cranky all the time. Why is Randy cranky? Is it cranky because he's not sleeping enough? Is he eating enough, healthy foods? Like it goes down more in depth than just, surface level.
And I also think the conversation aligns with the same messages that you telegraph, right? So if your leader is always coming in exhausted,
Yeah.
maybe it's because they're working too many hours and maybe it's because they're partying as hard as they work. Neither one of those are helpful or safe to the organization. And the amount of productivity I saw the other day, it runs between 5 and 15% productivity loss due to sleep.
Oh, yeah.
That's a significant number once you start applying that across all of your employees.
Absolutely. And think of that translating to dollars. Think of all the dollars
Yes.
lost. you
Well,
know, it's interesting.
And I wanted to circle back to the conversation. You mentioned you worked third shift. So a lot of the people that listen to me are from manufacturing,
Yep.
right? Like 25 years manufacturing engineer. Um, Shift work needs to be steady for the employee. And the reason it has to be steady is because it is the only way they have a fighting chance to get their
Yes.
circadian rhythms in balance. And yes, there is a little bit of extra money associated with second and third shift, but I would like to also point out that there is also a little bit of extra weight associated with second and third shift. And it's about 10 to 15% for second shifters and 25%. Consider that a 25% weight gain for somebody that is working third shift consistently. And then some of these companies that do that cycle, I haven't heard
Yeah.
since COVID, I haven't heard people forcing that cycle where you're working one shift, like first shift for 2 weeks, second shift for 2 weeks, third shift. People like it from a perception of fairness where you get to see your family. And I see that and I hear that, but it is so incredibly hard on your body that I never endorse it. I have never endorsed it since I started working in manufacturing 16 years old, right? Like it is not healthy in the long run for that individual. And eventually it is not healthy for the family either.
No, absolutely. It's not sustainable. And and I think that's the issue. It's looking at sustainability. And, I think no matter what type of company that you are in, you need to be looking at this from a big picture to say, okay, well, these decisions, because like you said, a lot of these are decisions, like we're going to split these shifts and allow it to be fair, allow it to be whatever. And again, on one angle, that makes sense, but you have to look at that big picture. What's the big picture look like? Because, much to your point, it's going to be really hard to regulate any type of, sleep schedule that's going to be sustainable for that person to function at any type of a
Yep.
high capacity. It's hard enough really on the body because I have a lot of people that I see in Columbus at the doctor's office that I see people at for nutrition that are third shifters. And I say a lot, I probably got five or whatever, but that's something that it's a consistent struggle. They've been doing it for years and years and years, but it's still
Yep.
a consistent struggle. You can see the impact on health, and it is even more of an issue if there's not that steady schedule, that steady
Yep.
cycle. And
Yep.
I think that that is something that definitely, needs to be looked at as far as like before any decisions are made, like what does this look like for our people?
Yep. So last week I was interviewing an individual and he gave me a really great sound bite and he said, sunlight before screen light when you
Yeah.
wake up in the morning, right? And I really love that, but I also didn't want to go down that rabbit hole. But since we're talking about shift work, I never had that luxury. My
Yeah.
shift started at 6:30 and I have
Mhm.
an hour drive. So I have to leave the house at 5:30 at the absolute latest. That's if I don't have a meeting before the shift starts and all the other things, right? Like there's absolutely no way when you work the hours that I was working that you would ever get sunlight before screen light. Do you have
Yeah.
any tips of like how people can kind of work their circadian rhythms to balance that out?
I mean, there's a lot of things that you can innovate. Like a lot of these things, like I like that quote too. That's a great quote. And I mean, I say lots of things too that in an ideal situation would work perfectly because a lot of times when somebody is giving you a suggestion like that, they're talking about in, you know, this typical scenario, this would be the best things to choose. And then it's changing it from there, right?
Of
To
course.
make it work for you. But, if you're leaving in the dark, you're going to work in the dark. You don't have the chance to let your eyes, see sunlight because it is good. It's typically good to get morning sunlight, as soon as you can. Now, that being said, maybe as soon as you can is after you've been at work for 3 hours and walk outside for 5 minutes. That's still going to be, the best that you could do. You're still getting some of that sunlight, right? And, there's some other things that you can do, just incorporating some different bulbs and stuff into, your environment that kind of helps a little bit. There are things that can be done. So, and I think that's important to kind of think about those kind of things because, when you hear all these suggestions on how to keep yourself healthy and you're like, okay, that's never going to work for me. Well, I'm screwed now because there's no way that I could ever do that. It's important to know that, yeah, you may not be able to kind of get that, well, I guess that Cadillac package, but you may be able to get something that's nice anyway, so as soon as you can get outside that day,
Well, so that's
yeah.
interesting, right? Like I have my blue light turned off, or like the blocker turns on my
Mhm.
phone in the evening, but I think it resets at midnight.
Yeah.
Like I don't know that I have the blue blocker turned on, but then the whole point of the blue light is that you're waking up, and I do actually need to be alert walking into a manufacturing site.
Yeah.
So, like I always tell people 10 fingers, 10 toes.
That's always the goal, right?
That is the goal. I want you to come in with them and I want you to go home with them. But yeah, I'm just trying to think like, how do you, right? Like, what is that opportunity to do a little bit better? Because I really believe that just 1% better, learning a little bit more, taking a tip here and taking a tip there can be enough to turn the tables in your favor.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot. I hate to give like specific suggestions on bulbs
Yeah.
without knowing because there's a lot of things that go into it. And, some people are on medications that, can be photosensitive or all those things. But I will say that there are bulbs out there, like for light therapy. There are
Yeah.
bulbs out there that you can get, like therapy lamps that you can get that mimic that natural daylight, at least as close as possible. And, the sun is always going to be the best, like, because I've had these conversations, but sometimes you can't, right?
Right.
So when you can't, you can choose different. And, typically, like if you're looking for like a lamp, and again, if you're on any medication, you check with somebody because there are some medications that can make you super photosensitive. So, it could actually burn you. But like a lamp that has a bulb with at least like 10,000 lux is typically what's recommended for mimicking daylight. So like
Mhm.
there are things to be able to do because that type of a bulb would trigger the same responses in the brain as natural sunlight would. So if it's something that you are like never out in the sunlight, let's go back to like the third shift. You're sleeping all day long. You're getting up when it's dark. You're, coming home when it's dark or, whatever. It's always dark. It may be a good idea to think about getting something like that because you could do some light therapy, take the time during your break and do a little bit of light therapy because that's
Hmm.
still going to be something that would help. And, there's a lot of brands, out there, but, there are always options. Like if you look at something that you're wanting to do for your health, your wellness, your business, life,
Yeah.
whatever, there's always options out there to kind of tweak it and make it your own.
Nice. One of the things that we had used for a while was the Philip Hue, and you
Mhm.
can set it to do the sunrise and the sunset.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you can either time it with the sunrise and sunset for your location, or, and it'll change like through the season, or you can set it for a certain time.
There's also, I'm trying to think what it's called. I think it's called Circadian Optics Lumos or something like that. It's close to that. But it is one that's pretty decent for light therapy as well. And it's
Nice.
one that's kind of like a little bit cooler temperature, so it's not as hot
Yeah.
too, but it still has that same, daylight mimicking option. So I mean, again, there's so many things out there, and the cool thing is there's Google. You can Google the entire
Right.
world and read things on it and study on it, and it's again just trying to remember that the goal here is just to prioritize these things, right? Prioritize your sleep, prioritize getting enough light,
Right.
prioritize your nutrition, and these are good for your mental health, your physical health, and your business health, right? It's just good for everything, all encompassing. And so think of it like an investment and just showing up the way you want to show up and living the life the way that you want to live.
Question.
Yes.
It's a curveball.
Okay.
You wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and you have a great new idea as the entrepreneur. Do you get up and do something about it, or do you try to go back to sleep?
It depends.
Okay.
I don't think there is a dead set thing that you have to do. I have done both. Typically, what I would say is if you have that idea, I always keep a notebook by my bed. Like I have a little like nightstand there and there's always a notebook and a pen. If it's something that you typically, are not going to be able to get out of your head, I just jot it down and I would probably lay down and try to go back to sleep. If you don't fall asleep though, in like 15, 20 minutes, I would just get up at that point because it's not going to happen. You're just going to lay there. You're better off just getting up at that point. But I would try, if it was me, doing this, I would try to go back to sleep. And then if I didn't fall back asleep, I would get up and start my day. And if it fit in later, try to take a little bit of a cat nap. I have a really hard time sleeping during the day. I've had to actually train myself, which sounds, I know, goofy to some people that are like avid nappers, but I've had to train myself because in the past I couldn't, if the sun was out, I could not go to sleep, but I've trained myself that if I need it, I can lay down. It's a short nap. Like I'm talking, 15, 20 minutes, but I've trained myself to be able to lay down and that kind of gives me a little bit of reset, to be able to kind of keep me going throughout the day. But that's what I would suggest. I don't think that it has to be like a hard set rule. Yes, it's great to get your minimum of 7 hours of sleep at night. And if you're getting up at 2 a.m., like chances are probably not going to meet that. But it also is one of those things that if you're waking up that, and you can't get back to sleep, there's no point laying there tossing and turning. You're not asleep anyway.
Right. I think it's depended, right? Like some days I've been able to kind of get back to sleep, write it down on the notepad, move on. But sometimes there were just times where like my body was like, no, I'm ready and it's time to go. And if it's possible, to your point, like luckily I am a good napper. Like my mom passed that along to me, thankfully. Like I would rather get up and work from 4 to 6 and then take a slow morning, take a couple hour nap, and then get back at it at like 10 a.m. or something. And I feel like I'm just as productive and maybe even more so because if I was trying to sleep unsuccessfully, then I would be super unproductive throughout the day.
And honestly, more drowsy. Like that's to me, that's more exhausting. But I'm like you. I am definitely an early morning person. Whether I set my alarm or not, I'm up at 5. It's just I love 5. 5 is great for me, and that ends up being a discussion that people have too. Like they think that to be a successful business person, you have to get up at 5. It works for me. It works for you, but you can make whatever work. You can make whatever work. I know people that do great late evenings. I don't. My brain starts falling out about 2 p.m. and it just slowly falls apart throughout the day. So that's just how it is. Like I've got like 3 brain cells left by the time I go back to bed.
I don't know how people do it. Even, like even to go out at night, I'm like, I have to take a nap so I can go out. I can't hang with the people.
I don't even go out anymore. I've to the point, like I've aged to the point that I'm just done with all that. Like I actually like was talking to somebody about this the other day. Like I'm to the point now that my going out is just walking out on my property, checking my chickens, drinking my tea. I want to be in bed at 9 p.m. I'm very excited about my bedtime.
Yeah. Well, it just depends on what you have on the schedule, right? And who you're meeting. And
Absolutely.
But I agree with you relative to like, as long as you're getting those hours and getting that healthy, like one of the reasons my child wants a later is because his friends live 2 hours that time zone behind.
Yeah.
And so they're not even on when I'm telling him to go to bed, right?
That happens a lot. And so it's balancing those things, right?
So we're trying to
Knowing that
balance out those needs. Yep.
Absolutely. And I think that's what it is, right? It's improving your sleep, uncomplicating it, and being able to establish some type of a consistent sleep schedule. Again, there's going to be the flukes, but trying to make it at least somewhat consistent. And, that's going to be huge. And then creating like a bedtime routine. We talk about morning routines, but creating a bedtime routine too. It's so important to have that bedtime routine. And it could be whatever works for you, right? It could be maybe you read, maybe you take a warm bath, maybe you sit and practice mindfulness, like whatever works for you. Like in my family, if I'm home by myself, it's a different bedtime routine than if the whole kids are there too, because for them, that means sitting down and either reading something or watching a short show together. And, it just looks different. It's more of like family evening than it is if it's just Maria. Yeah.
Right. So I recently jumped into the ice bath crowd craze, right? Like I've often, so I lived in Germany when I was a teenager. So we would go to the saunas and there was often a cold bath that wasn't these ice baths, but you would cycle between
cold and
sauna and then jumping into the cold pool. And so I was excited when the the ice came around to the United States as kind of like a socially acceptable thing. And I finally jumped on the Amazon Prime and found something that I was willing to pay for. So all I have to say about that is that for me, jumping into an ice bath and trying to go to bed, it does not work. Like for me, that is an energizing
I have
activity.
to do it in the morning. I have one too, and I do it in the morning.
And it is absolutely part of my morning routine, not part of my evening routine. Evening routine for me is always brushing my teeth before
Mhm.
I'm using the restroom. Like my body does not want to go in the other direction.
Yeah.
Like I've even gone upstairs and I got that out of order and I had to just like turn around out of habit. My body wants it in this order. I think it's probably just years of training, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, and everything is, I mean, technically everything is training. And so that's the thing. Like you can technically, train yourself differently. But I mean, there's no point with what you're doing. But I mean, I'm just saying that to say that's how bad
Yes,
habit you can get out of bad habits by just directing that training, right?
right.
And I think that that is something like maybe people are listening to this and like my sleep schedule is non-existent, my bedtime routine is non-existent, my morning routine is non-existent. There's like not one aspect that I have kind of together right now. That's all right, right? That's you're
Yeah,
starting somewhere. You can start implementing some of these things. And I would suggest maybe you start slow, right? Maybe pick one thing. And I would suggest starting with your sleep because again, it's the foundation. But thinking about, what are some things that you need to be able to get a comfortable night's rest? For me, I need it dark. I don't want it cold, but I want it cool, not hot. I don't like the air to be all thick, even though I love it hot. I love hot weather. I want it cool when I sleep.
mm-hmm.
And, I need it to be quiet, except for I listen to frequencies when I sleep.
Okay.
I usually listen to 432 hertz to be specific, but sometimes 528, but I listen to frequencies when I sleep. And so that's the only thing I want on. And so that is how I like
Do
to
you
sleep.
listen with headphones or do you have it just running in the
Have
room?
it running in the room. And it's funny, I started doing that with my son, who's on the spectrum when he was very young, when he was little. And that started really helping him. He would be able to sleep much more deeply when I did that. Because I ended up getting, I think you know this, but I ended up getting certified in sound healing back years ago just to try to help him. And so that was one of the things that we started implementing in that. Like we did a lot of djembe work during the day, and I took him to drumming circles, and he really would use that to express himself before he was, very verbal. And then, some of that also started including a lot of the frequencies, especially when he slept. And that would really help to kind of calm his nervous system and get him into a deep sleep. And so I was like, well, why am I not doing that for myself? And
Right.
I started noticing that that made such a difference in the quality of my sleep. And so my younger kids, the 11-year-old and 7-year-old, they've always slept with them. They've never known any different from the time they were born. They've always slept with frequencies on. And so, it's just one of those things that works best for us. And
Right.
some people may be like, that's not what I want. And that's all right, but it's like figuring out what works for you. And if you don't know, try something. And if you're like, nope, this isn't it, then try something else.
And there's a lot to be said for healing frequencies. I think we could probably do an entire podcast
Oh, yeah,
on that, and even talking about my instrument of choice, because a lot of people naturally gravitate to it for that very reason. And
absolutely.
people have asked me why I haven't released a CD. That's just
You should.
that would be a lot of fun. It would be really kind of in line, once again, the Venn diagram of everything that is Angela.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
Put that on my list of things to do. So now I won't be able to sleep tonight while I think about that.
All right. Well, just jot it out before bed, get it all out of your system. Or sometimes I'll even like I have notes on my phone. I'll just pull it up and I'll just brain dump a bunch of stuff in there. And I
Yep.
feel like I've checked it off then because at least it's out of my brain and
Yes.
somewhere else. Since
Yep.
that helps me, depending on if I've got a lot of things like,
Yep. 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 Okay. So Maria, what are the top things that you recommend if someone is struggling during the day, keeping themselves alert? What do we want to like, just kind of the top most recommended? Obviously they're not specific to a person, but have you tried this? Have you tried that? Where do you start with that top of the checklist?
Well, obviously making sure you're staying hydrated. That's a big thing.
Yep.
If you're not hydrated, that's going to cause a lot of issues with your energy. Getting up and moving around, like today is my meeting days. And so during that time, I have a lot of time right here, right in front of my screen. Right. So I have a standing desk. So I'm able to use that to stand up and down. But even
Mhm.
within that, I will, take some walks and stuff on. It's making sure I'm moving your body. You
Yes.
can do like chair yoga at the desk. And if you don't even know what that is, just Google chair
Yep.
yoga. You'll find lots of little things. Moving your body a little bit, making sure you're staying hydrated, making sure you're eating. I typically tell people if they're tired not to eat a bunch of heavy stuff, eat something light,
Yeah.
some salad, some fruit, something that's going to be easy to digest because your body is already exhausted. It doesn't need to work super hard digesting something that's super heavy. And then just making sure that you are keeping, the distractions to a minimum, because that's another thing. We get overstimulated. A lot of people hear that only with autism. And that was me back before I had a child that was autistic. I thought that was only reserved for autism. Nope. I get overstimulated.
Right.
I stim, right? I mean, it's those things that we do just as humans. So it's also trying to, minimize these distractions that are taking our time and our, energy. If we're like low on energy that day, we don't want to give it away. So those are some things that I always, always try to implement during those times.
Great. Well, thank you very much for spending your time. It's always a pleasure to meet with you. We managed to get through an entire episode without talking about plants.
That was amazing, actually.
Right. So when I get further into some of these seasons, we'll have to have you back on, and you and I can just sort of geek out about the
I would love
importance
that.
of plants and our health and everything else. So
I would love that.
um, it's actually pretty amazing. So
Yeah,
thank you very much for joining us today and sharing with my audience everything that you have experienced with helping people keep their energy up and making sure that they get the sleep that they need holistically.
it was my pleasure.
Thanks. Talk to you soon. You've just listened to another episode of Overcome to Become. Thank you for joining me, Angela Buckley, your host, as we explored actions and mindsets to overcome the overwhelm and beat burnout. Did you know that when you learn to lead yourself, you can effectively learn to lead others? You can apply these skills in your home, at work, and in the community. If you'd like to learn more, join us in the Strength in Nature Learning Academy. We are currently featuring the Overcome the Overwhelm course with a 20% off coupon code, OTB2024. That's valid until the end of 2024. You can join me in my community at www.strengthinnature.com and on Instagram at creativelyefficient. Thanks for listening. I look forward to hearing from you soon.